This week on Morning Mika.
Nosotros estábamos en el cuarto alistándonos para ir a la escuela y luego los de ICE tumbaron la puerta y nos dio mucho miedo, nos pusimos a llorar.
And what do you think about when you're in school?
Que pueden llegar los de ICE otra vez a la escuela y que esta vez pueden entrar y nos pueden a llevar a nosotros.
Yo lo que les decía era que si me iban a deportar, que por favor fueran a buscar a mis hijas, porque yo no quería que a mí me mandaran a mi país sin ellas, porque ellas solo me tienen a mí. Entonces, fue una experiencia muy triste. La niña a veces en la noche, ella tiene como pesadillas, ella llora, ella se despierta llorando, y yo le digo, mi amor, todo va a estar bien, no va a pasar nada. Y yo tengo fe en Dios de que todo va a estar bien.
That was Maria Gonzalez, an immigrant from El Salvador, who told NBC's Julia Ainsley about her family's harrowing experience when ICE agents broke down the door of her Denver apartment in a sweeping raid earlier this year. She was taken into ICE custody, leaving behind her two daughters, 9-year-old Nicole, who you just saw, and Jade, 11 months old. After 6 hours, she was reunited with her children, but the family now lives in constant fear. President Trump promised ICE would go after the worst of the worst violent criminals. Yet, in reality, his immigration raids have cast a far wider net, with reports of agents sweeping up everyday worker, farmhand, construction crews, restaurant workers, people with deep ties to their communities and no rap sheets. According to the latest numbers, there are over 55,000 migrants in ICE detention. But those numbers don't tell the whole story, with the ripple effects often hitting women and mothers first. School data from California's Central Valley show student absences jumping 22% the day after local raids began in January, with the biggest spikes in pre-K and elementary grades. Kids are staying home because they are afraid mom won't be there when the final bell rings. Recent operations have also produced cases where children were literally left with nobody to care for them after agents detained a parent. And then there's the impact of the constant threat of raids, making it difficult for women to feel safe in their communities. A recent KFF poll found 6 in 10 lawfully present immigrants, people with green cards, and even some U.S. citizens, now fear a family member could be detained or deported. Joining me now to discuss is NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley, who has been inside these communities and speaking with women who are living this nightmare in real time. Also with us, my Morning Mika co-hosts Simone Sanders-Townsend and Jen Psaki. So Julia, tell us more about the mother that we began this show with, mother of two. Her story, is it emblematic of other immigrant women in this country?
It is, Mika, and I also have an update. So we interviewed her earlier this year after she was taken in by ICE, and when ICE agents found out there wasn't anyone able to take care of her children, they released her after 6 hours. Of course, those were 6 harrowing hours. The family has now been deported to El Salvador, and she took her children with them. Now, the baby was a U.S. citizen. The 9-year-old had a pending application in order to get asylum and protection in the United States. So she was faced with this very tough choice that a lot of mothers are facing, which is, do I separate from my child, try to find someone to take care of them here? In this case, she had no family here to take care of them. Or do I bring them back to the conditions that I had to flee? Her husband died in El Salvador, and she said that she felt she had no way to protect her family, was worried about violence there, and that's why she fled. So now they're back in El Salvador, and she did say the family's having a hard time adjusting, but she made the decision to bring her children with her. And this is exactly the answer that you get from Tom Homan, President Trump's Borders Are, when you ask, is mass deportations just family separation by another name? And he says, well, look, these families can decide to deport with their children. But when you see it in reality and see the stark consequences of the policy and the harsh realities that these women face when having to make these decisions, it's clear that it's not just as simple as checking a box, and that oftentimes there is a separation when you see children left behind from these very aggressive ICE raids and the tactics that they're taking now.
Can you put in perspective for us sort of how many stories like that are there, and how widespread is that choice that you mentioned that this mother has to make?
Well, it's getting more widespread, Jen. In fact, under the Obama administration, they began family detention because we saw more families crossing the border. It was a way to disincentivize people from coming across the border with young children, something they were starting to see more of. They would detain families together before deporting them together. But that's something the Biden administration put an end to, family detention. And it's something the Trump administration is bringing back. They're detaining more families, and they are specifically targeting families and some of their plans. We saw around March there was a plan to go after more immigrant families as well as unaccompanied children who came to the U.S. without parents. And so it's part of a larger plan that I think sometimes goes missing when we're talking about how Trump thinks is going after the worst of the worst. There's actually an intentionality here to go after families in a way to try to disincentivize people from coming into the United States, many of those who would have valid asylum claims as they seek those here.
Julia, this is just hard to discuss and listen to, because we are talking about people who in many respects have been fleeing very terrible circumstances, made a harrowing journey to this country. Some people who have been here for decades and are now living in fear. What else are you seeing in terms of the impact of that fear? Mika talked a little bit about it at the top. And also, I know that there are these efforts to encourage people to even self-deport so that they can avoid the trauma that we're seeing in these videos. But isn't that a different type of angst, if you will?
Yeah. I think those videos are having a big impact, particularly when it comes to vulnerable populations. Oftentimes, a hardened criminal wouldn't see a video like that and think, wow, I better go back to my home country so that I don't face a chaotic or violent arrest. There's also a big change that happened at the Justice Department level that has particular implications for women, and that is that they no longer allow asylum to be granted to women who are victims of domestic violence. So gender alone and the possibility of facing violence based on your gender is not enough to claim asylum. That's something that Jeff Sessions worked to undo when he was Attorney General. The Biden administration put it back on the books, and now the Trump administration has ended that again. So that has big implications for women who are fleeing violence, trying to get their families to a safer place in the United States, if that can no longer be held in court. And over again, we're seeing judges and immigration judges work for the Justice Department, not for the judicial branch. They are being told, dismiss asylum cases so that people can be quickly arrested in your courtrooms and put on the fast track for deportation. So again, it's a big culture of fear, and that fear has the biggest impact on families and vulnerable populations.
Julia, the part of the backdrop of all of this is this big ugly bill, as I like to call it, that Trump signed into law on Friday, which we talk a lot about the Medicaid cuts and the dramatic impact on SNAP benefits, but there's also a huge influx of funding for ICE in that bill. The size of many foreign militaries, just to put it in perspective for people. From your perspective, since you've been covering this so closely, and from the experts you talk to, how do they anticipate that this is going to embolden ICE or add to their resources or even up these type of raids that we've been talking about?
I mean, the floodgates are just about to open, Jen. What you've seen now is only a sliver of the force that ICE is about to show. Just for perspective, ICE currently has a $9 billion budget. They were just given $45 billion in that bill just for detention. So they're going to drastically ramp up the space where they can hold immigrants, they can arrest. They also have been given a lot of money to go out and hire more people, some very attractive hiring bonuses that they can give people and retention bonuses to be able to beef up their workforce. There's been a thinking that ICE couldn't do it alone, so they brought in a lot of people from the Justice Department, like the U.S. Marshals and the FBI and DEA, to be making arrests. Now ICE could maintain levels far higher than that, just within the scope of their own manpower. And so I think this is just the beginning. Another big trigger that came just days before the signing of the big, beautiful bill is the Supreme Court saying that the Trump administration can deport immigrants to countries other than their own. And so that means if an immigration judge has said this person cannot go back to their home country, they have a legitimate fear of persecution or torture or death, the Trump administration can now work around those orders and send them to third countries. So those two things taken together, the ruling and the money, means that we are about to see ICE at a level we haven't even talked about yet.
You know, Julia, when ICE or DHS makes these arrests before deportations happen, they often are holding people in detention facilities across the country. And Donald Trump recently unveiled a new migrant detention center in the Florida swamplands. He is calling it Alligator Alcatraz. We've had some reporting from the Miami Herald about the conditions inside that detention center. I know some legislators in Florida have looked for access to the detention center and were denied that access, saying it was unsafe. One, is there a fear that women and children could end up in this so-called Alligator Alcatraz? And what is your reporting telling you about the conditions inside?
Well, Simone, what makes Alligator Alcatraz different from every other immigration detention center that I've ever covered is that it's not run by ICE. It's run by the state of Florida. And so access and basic questions to things like how many people are being put in a cell? Are they getting outside time? Are they able to shower or brush their teeth? These are complaints that we've been hearing from advocates about the conditions there, but haven't been able to confirm yet. It's really hard to get answers to that. And it's unclear what standards they are supposed to meet because it isn't ICE standards. In fact, they've told their affiliate, we meet all the standards. Well, what standards? Standards that have been created overnight by now having a state run an immigration detention facility. And another thing is they've said that they are not ruling out the possibility of bringing women, children, and the elderly into that facility, which of course raises questions not only about how those people would be treated, how they would be targeted, but also about the oversight. ICE has already really had a cut to their oversight this year. The Office of Immigration Detention Oversight, the Ombudsman Office, has been gutted this year. Those were people who made unannounced check-ins at ICE detention facilities. And then to have something like this spring out outside of ICE, we understand it actually might be a model the Trump administration wants to use in other red states. The only caveat here is that we do not think that there is a real plan for DHS to pay Florida back for this. That is the one thing that I think could slow down the growth of Alligator Alcatraz, is that there is no paper, there is no memorandum of understanding that DHS is going to reimburse FEMA. So it may be an issue of funding drying up before there's a real question about accountability and the conditions there, Simone.
Julia Ainsley, we cannot thank you enough for your continued reporting on this story, and we thank you for joining us on Morning Mika. And let's do it again. Let's stay on this. I think you're right. I think this only gets ramped up, especially with that money in the bill that was just passed. Simone Sanders Townsend and Jen Psaki, thank you as well, of course. Morning Mika will be back soon on YouTube and Peacock.